Have you ever heard this quote? He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. It was a famous quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, and this boy, Lee Sin-hyuk, just read it without any emotion. He was sitting in this strange big library and just writing away in his notebook. Suddenly, this old professor dude asked him how long he'd been there, and Sin-hyuk answered, saying it had been 180 months, like, exactly 15 years. The professor sighs and tells him the time has come. Sin-hyuk looked confused and asked what the old man meant, but before he knew it, some weird voice started echoing in his mind, calling out his name in a bunch of trippy words. Sin-hyuk freaked out, sweating and looking around like, what the hell was that? The professor asked if he could hear the sound, and our boy nodded, saying it sounded like a person's voice. Then the professor started getting all deep, reminding him about the first time he came to this library as a little kid. Sin-hyuk had been desperate, eyes full of fire, looking for answers. The professor told him he'd been obsessed with studying everything possible. Crime, psychology, science, you name it, for 15 whole years, just searching for that one answer. So, the professor wanted to know if Sin-hyuk had finally found what he was looking for. Sin-hyuk was about to answer, but then the professor stuck out his hand, all dramatic, and suggested they shake hands first. After some hesitation, our MC took his hand and felt like real warmth. The professor got even more philosophical, telling him that he'd probably face the monster inside himself during his journey, and sometimes he'd fall into the darkness, but he should remember this warmth. Then the professor said it. It was time to open his eyes. Sin-hyuk was like, huh? But the professor insisted the answer wasn't here in this library. He had to go out into the real world to find it. Suddenly, a massive wave of golden light exploded everywhere. Suddenly he was surrounded by pure darkness, buzzing with electricity, and he was in pain. Voices started calling his name, asking if he was awake, checking his vitals, and telling a nurse to fetch Professor Kim. It was all chaos, but then, out of the darkness, a super creepy face appeared, red lines running from the eyes like bloody tears, and told Sin-hyuk to open his eyes. And just like that, our hero snapped back to the real world, a hospital room, bright and busy. He gasped for air, blinking, and saw doctors and nurses all around him. They all freaked out, asking if he was awake, and Sin-hyuk just stared at his tiny arm, shocked that he was suddenly a kid again. He touched his face, totally losing it, thinking about how he'd just been with the professor as a grown-up. Was that life in the library real? Or was this the dream? Poor dude, he was lost. Which one is the reality? One of the doctors, Professor Kim, came over and did the whole light in the eyes routine, asking if Sin-hyuk felt dizzy or sick. Sin-hyuk told him he was fine, but he wanted to know how long he'd been out. The answer? Over a month. Our boy was shook. He'd been in a coma, but suddenly thinking hard, at least his body was working fine if there was no ventilator. Then Professor Kim started acting all curious, asking if Sin-hyuk was always this interested in medicine. Sin-hyuk played it cool, just saying he was. The professor explained that his brainwaves had been changing every 10 days. First theta waves, then beta, then alpha. Our boy blurted out that the theta wave is a brainwave that appears when a child imagines. The beta waves appear when an adolescent studies logical reasoning, and the alpha waves are an adult state when everything has been settled. These 30 days are his dream, basically just like a kid growing up into an adult. Sin-hyuk realized it made sense. His mind had basically lived through 15 years of growing up in that single month. Right then, he wondered if all that time in the library wasn't just some random dream. Hearing all those explanations made Professor Kim lose his mind, laughing at how a little kid could know about brainwaves. The other doctors had to chill him out before he started scaring people. Later, our MC splashed water on his face in the bathroom, looking at his reflection and remembering how it all started. The memory hit him hard. A snowy night, his drunk father dragging him to a pickup truck, yelling at him to get in and not to talk back. Sin-hyuk, with all his bruises after getting beaten up, tried to warn his dad about the slippery roads, but the old man ignored him, screaming about blaming someone for his mother's death. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a random man appeared in the road. His dad freaked, yanked the steering wheel, and the truck spun out, crashed through a guardrail, and tumbled down a staircase before smashing into a pole. Guess what? His last memory is when his dad was dead, impaled by glass, eyes wide open. Brutal, bro. Back in the hospital bathroom, Sin-hyuk felt empty, wondering if all the stuff in the coma, the adult life, and the knowledge was just fake. Suddenly, he heard someone yell there, mumbling about how the doctors were running all these tests and talking about his brain, but he figured they just wanted more money. He decided to discharge himself that day. He never wanted treatment anyway. He called a friend, asking to be picked up because he couldn't go home alone. Hearing that man's symptoms, Sin-hyuk thought about what the doctor said. A small amygdala, a low heart rate, and a need to control others. He flashed back to the professor's lessons in his dream. The amygdala is about feelings, guilt, and conscience. So a small one could mean a person doesn't have much emotion. Add in a low heart rate, means he doesn't scare easily. That kind of person might get bored with life and look for dangerous thrills, even murder. Yeah, our MC was thinking some dark stuff. Suddenly, a tall dude in a hospital gown came out of the next stall and lit a cigarette right there. Real thug vibes. The guy recognized Sin-hyuk, saying they were roommates, and Sin-hyuk was famous for waking up after a coma. Sin-hyuk noticed the man's bandaged hand and asked about it. The guy claimed it was just a knife cut, nothing serious. Sin-hyuk then acted worried and wished him a quick recovery, but the guy just laughed, said thanks, and joked about not sharing his last cigarette. He patted Sin-hyuk's head and left. After that, Sin-hyuk went to the reception desk, politely asking the nurse if he could borrow her phone to check the internet. The nurse guessed he wanted to see if the world had changed while he was out, and handed it over. Our boy dove into the news and found a story about a woman stabbed 3 days ago, 20 centimeters knife, right abdomen to left chest, sounded left-handed. Suddenly, he remembered the tall guy's story about a knife cut on his left hand. His mind was racing. Was the guy the attacker? Based on his lessons on criminal psychology, the chance was like 99%. After finding out the truth, he gave the phone back to the nurse, all cool, and went on his way. But inside he was wondering if the stuff he learned in his dream would actually work in the real world. That last 1% of doubt? He wanted to check it himself. So, our dude pulled out a little baggie with the guy's cigarette butt, slipped into a phone booth, and dialed emergency services, a sly grin on his face. He even wonders to himself why he is smiling and thrilled like this. Bro, our protagonist was acting like a detective or maybe even something scarier. That smile? Yeah, it gave me chills. Meanwhile, in the police office, a poor detective was getting roasted by his captain. The captain was screaming, asking if the detective wasn't even embarrassed. He said the detective's junior was about to get promoted first and wanted to know if he was just going to stand there and let it happen, looking like some lazy clown. The captain kept yelling, telling him to look at his performance record and basically tossing papers at him like, "Hey, look at this trash record of yours." The captain said if the detective didn't fix his stats with a big win this time, there was no way he could help him anymore. The detective didn't say a word. He just walked out, looking like death warmed over, and sat at his desk with his head in his hands, thinking his life sucked. Just then, his desk phone started ringing non-stop. The poor guy groaned and picked it up with a sigh, saying this was the detective division. And guess who was on the other end? Yup, our MC, Sin-hyuk, playing detective in a hospital payphone booth. He started off all polite, thanking the cop for his work. Then he dropped the bomb, asking if the detective remembered the attempted murder case from 3 days ago where some woman got stabbed. The detective was like, "What?" Sin-hyuk kept going, saying the suspect was a guy named Jo Jong-hwan in room 1407 at Daehan University Hospital. Now the detective was starting to get suspicious, asking who the hell was calling. But Sin-hyuk was ready for that, bro. He thought to himself that even though he made his voice sound all grown up, they'd probably just think it was some kid who hit puberty too fast. He knew that the cops wouldn't act unless he threw in some details, only the real deal would know. So, he told the detective that they found the suspect's blood on the victim's clothes. He explained it was from when the guy slipped with the knife and cut his left index finger, getting his blood all over the woman. Sin-hyuk added that the suspect probably did a similar crime before this. Like, the last time was just practice, but if they let him go, it could turn into a full-on serial murder case. The detective's eyes went wide. Our boy Sin-hyuk could tell he was getting somewhere now. He kept pushing. Sin-hyuk said he had the actual cigarette butt the suspect smoked. The detective was stunned. Sin-hyuk said if the cops checked the DNA on the butt and matched it with the blood on the victim's clothes, it would be solid evidence. He was forcing the detective to move fast. No time to sit around. He even told him the suspect was being discharged that day, and if they didn't catch him now, it could be game over. He said this was the perfect chance to nab a would-be serial killer, so don't screw it up. The detective was just sitting there, stunned. Sin-hyuk hung up with a sly little smile, feeling like a mastermind. Back at the police station, the detective hung up the phone and just sat, deep in thought. That brain was finally turning, bro. Then his junior detective showed up and asked if he hadn't eaten yet, and if the captain chewed him out again. But the detective just remained silent, then asked the junior if the DNA results from that attempted robbery murder came back. The junior said nope, maybe tomorrow. But the detective slammed his hand on the desk, acting all fired up, and told the junior to come with him. The junior was confused, but followed anyway. Cut to outside the hospital. A silver car flew up and stopped so fast it probably left tire marks. The detective and his sidekick ran inside, looking like they meant business. Sin Hyuk watched them from a distance, just chilling. At the desk, the detective flashed his badge and asked if there was a patient named Jo Jong-hwan in room 1407. The nurse freaked out and wanted to know what was going on. The detective said they got a report that the guy was the suspect in that attempted murder case. The nurse was shook and started scrambling. That's when Sin Hyuk rolled up to the group and said, "Hey, Mr. Police." The detective turned around and saw Sin Hyuk holding up a plastic bag with the cigarette butt inside. The detective asked where he got it, and Sin Hyuk, playing it cool, said some guy told him to give it to the police if they came. The detective asked who the guy was and where he went. Sin Hyuk just pointed vaguely and said he didn't know. Then a young doctor in glasses appeared, saying he was Jo Jong-hwan's attending doctor. Meanwhile, in Jong-hwan's hospital room, the man himself was getting dressed and looking at his bandaged finger. He was thinking back to the attack, remembering the feeling of stabbing the woman. He thought to himself that if the knife had just gone in a little deeper, maybe things would have been different while licking his lips. Dude was creepy, not gonna lie. Back in the hallway, the detective, his junior, and the doctor were speed-walking to the room. The junior detective was worried, saying it was risky to try an emergency arrest just based on some tip. He said if the DNA didn't match, they'd be in trouble, and the captain was already losing his mind. The detective remembered his captain yelling at him about performance scores and said he'd take all the heat, so they should just follow him. The doctor opened the door to the room, and bam, the bed was empty. Another patient piped up saying Jong-hwan just left with his bag, acting like he was being discharged. The doctor freaked out because the paperwork wasn't even done. The detectives looked at each other, panicked, and then the detective dashed out, swearing under his breath. Now, out in the hospital lobby, Jong-hwan was trying to leave. He was on his phone, bragging to someone that he was about to head out, and his friend said the car should be waiting. He looked smug as hell. Suddenly, someone called out, asking him what the hell he was doing leaving without paying his hospital bill. He turned around, and surprise, there was Sin Hyuk standing right there. Bro, he literally said what the hell to that psychopath. Looking at him, Jong-hwan realized it was the kid from the Coma and tried to play it cool, saying he didn't know what Sin Hyuk was talking about and who said he didn't pay. He asked what he was even doing there. Sin Hyuk stared at him and said he was looking for him. Hearing that, Jong-hwan was confused. Sin Hyuk said there was one thing he really wanted to ask. How did it feel when he shoved the knife into the woman's abdomen? Bro, the killer's face froze. He stared at Sin Hyuk, who just kept going. Jong-hwan suddenly smiled, saying Sin Hyuk wasn't a normal kid, and asking if he really wanted to know. He described what it felt like, the sharp vibration in his fingers when the knife hit the bone under the skin. It feels super awesome. The fuck? He sounded twisted, dude. But our boy Sin Hyuk just looked at him, unimpressed. He told the guy not to kid himself, saying he thought he was special just because he stabbed someone. He said Jong-hwan didn't even have the guts to face the woman. He attacked from behind and ran off like a coward, only to get in a car crash running away from a woman he was too scared to fight. Jong-hwan lost it, calling Sin Hyuk a little punk and daring him to say that again. He grabbed him by the collar, threatening to beat him up. But Sin Hyuk just smirked, his eyes cold as ice, like he didn't care one bit. Bro, our MC was savage. Just as Jong-hwan raised his hand to hit him, another hand shot out of nowhere and grabbed his wrist, stopping him cold. It was the detective, finally catching up. Man, talk about timing. Our hero was playing with fire, but he looked like he was having the time of his life. Anyway, as the detective grabbed the man's hand, he could see the injured left index finger, remembering the case details. The culprit had a cut on the left finger, and now he knew for sure. Jong-hwan tried to walk it off, putting on a fake smile and saying there must be some misunderstanding, that Sin Hyuk was just too cute and he never meant any harm. But the detective wasn't buying it. He asked if Jong-hwan was actually the man he was looking for. Jong-hwan tried to play dumb, like he had no idea who they were talking about. But the detective threw down his badge, told him he was police, and said he was under emergency arrest. Jong-hwan was so shocked, asking why they were arresting him. The detective started reading him his rights, telling him he could stay silent or get a lawyer if he wanted. That made Jong-hwan lose his cool, cursing at the detective and suddenly shoving the detective, then trying to run. The junior detective freaked out, calling for his senior, and tried to grab that killer as he bolted. The detective shouted for his partner to catch that bastard, and right then, Jong-hwan tried to race past Sin Hyuk. But our boy didn't even flinch. He just calmly stuck out his foot, tripping Joe flat on his face. Bro, the timing was perfect. Zhang hit the floor hard and started yelling, demanding they let him go, screaming that he was a patient and cops weren't allowed to treat him like that. The junior detective just told him to shut up as the two of them dragged him away, still fighting. But the detective paused and looked at our MC, probably thinking, what kind of kid is this? He told his partner to load Zhang into the car first, saying he'd follow soon. The junior detective was confused and wanted to know where his senior was going, but the detective waved him off and walked back to Sin Hyuk. He then asked if Sin Hyuk remembered the man from earlier, the one who'd given him the cigarette butt. Sin Hyuk nodded and called him Mr. Police Officer, acting all polite. The detective wanted to know if the guy had said anything else, holding up the evidence bag. Before things got awkward, Professor Kim walked up and introduced himself as the doctor in charge, and asked what happened. The detective explained that he was police and needed to report something, and he wanted to ask the boy a few questions since he'd met the informant. Professor Kim seemed worried, telling the detective that Sin Hyuk had only just woken from a coma and was still emotionally unstable. But Sin Hyuk cut in, saying he was okay now. Then he pretended the man earlier said something to him. He started dropping hardcore psychology facts about Jo Jong-hwan, saying the guy had a small amygdala and a low heart rate, and he showed signs of being antisocial with a tendency to control others. He even said that man was in a melancholy state. The detective was surprised and asked what he meant by melancholy. Sin Hyuk explained that after a first attempted or successful murder, serial killers often experienced depression. If the first crime wasn't as exciting as they'd hoped, that's when the sadness hit. The real danger came next. If they tried to fix that sadness by committing another crime and actually succeeded, then it was game over. That's how serial killers were born, one crime after another, never stopping. He said if Jong-hwan had been left alone, there definitely would have been another victim. The detective was shocked, asking if the random informant had really said all that. Sin Hyuk just smiled and nodded like a sweet kid. Then Professor Kim said it was time for Sin Hyuk to rest and called for a nurse. The nurse showed up, ready to lead Sin Hyuk back to his room, and asked if he wanted to go together. As Sin Hyuk walked off, the detective turned to Professor Kim and asked about the kid's parents, thinking maybe they were the ones who'd called the cops. But Professor Kim said both parents had passed away. The detective just nodded, said goodbye, and walked off. But he didn't look happy, wondering how the kid could remember all that from a quick conversation. He thought it was strange, almost like Sin Hyuk was the one who'd actually said it all. The detective was starting to suspect our boy might be some kind of profiler. A few days later, Sin Hyuk was sitting in the hospital waiting area, watching the news on a giant TV. The news anchor was talking about the attempted murder case, saying the police had finally caught the suspect, some guy in his 20s, living near the victim. Apparently, he'd stabbed a woman under the ribs with a kitchen knife and ran for it, and now police were looking into more crimes he might have committed against women in the same area. Sin Hyuk watched the news, thinking to himself that everything he'd learned in his coma actually worked in real life. Maybe it wasn't just a crazy dream after all. As he got up to walk away, he passed a little girl with green-tipped pigtails. She gasped when she saw him, and he stopped. Sin Hyuk was holding a bag of snacks. He asked if she wanted some, saying she could have all of them. The girl was hyped, and took a lollipop out of the bag. She told Sin Hyuk he was awesome, calling him Oppa, and giggling while she licked her candy. Then, out of nowhere, something hit Sin Hyuk hard. He froze, his eyes going wide in horror. The moment the word Oppa hit his ears, his mind exploded with a vision. A dead woman with brown hair, bloody and lying on the ground. He suddenly felt a stabbing pain and heard buzzing in his head. Sin Hyuk wondered if it was a real memory or just some hallucination from being in a coma. But if it was just delirium, why did it hurt so bad? By the way, delirium is a hallucination or memory disorder, and a common symptom after coma. He started crying, clutching his chest, feeling crushed by the memory of his mom's death. Then, in his reflection, he saw a monstrous black shadow with glowing yellow eyes staring at him. The monster's voice ran through his mind, telling him he should already know. His mom died because of him. Sin Hyuk gasped and snapped out of it, finding a nurse calling his name. She asked if something was wrong since he hadn't answered when she called. Sin Hyuk brushed it off and asked what was up. The nurse said Professor Kim wanted to see him and asked if that was okay. Sin Hyuk agreed, following her down the hall. Looking at the mirror again, that monster was already gone. As he walked away, two nurses at the station started gossiping. They said Sin Hyuk was getting discharged that day, and it felt like just yesterday he was rushed into the ER. One nurse said she was shocked when she first saw him, because he had way more bruises from beatings than from the car accident. The other nurse said his dad had been drunk driving and wondered if the man had actually wanted the two of them to die together. Apparently, Sin Hyuk survived because he was wearing his seatbelt. but his dad wasn't so lucky. And his mom had already died in a traffic accident 6 months before. The nurses wondered what would happen to Sin-hyuk after discharge, since he had no one. They said not a single visitor had come to see him the whole time he was there. Normally, he'd go to an orphanage, but Professor Kim wanted to adopt him. One nurse was shocked, saying Professor Kim was single and rich, so for Sin-hyuk, it was like winning the jackpot, or even the lottery. They were honestly jealous that he'd be living the golden life now. Back to our boy. The nurse led him to Professor Kim's office, stopping at the door with a sign for Professor Kim Min-woo. She called in, saying she had brought Sin-hyuk, and was told to bring him inside. But while all this hopeful stuff was happening, the scene suddenly shifted. Somewhere else, in a rundown alley, a girl named Bora was feeding a white cat. She played with the cat, took some pictures, and looked happy. A woman's voice called out, asking if she was feeding the cat and where her parents were. Bora answered that her dad was at work and her mom had gone to the store. But then, the person asking was this creepy man with a huge grin, thinking to himself that no one was around, and maybe it was time to do something bad. This crazy shit is so creepy. Like everyone is dangerous for God's sake. The shadowy figure then dropped a story about how a kitten showed up at his place. No mom, looking all cold and sad. You could tell the guy was hyping this up, trying to hook Bora in. Bora immediately asked if it was true. A kitten? The man said yeah, and asked if she wanted to take the kitten in. He said he had no cat food or anything, so maybe Bora could help out. Bora totally lit up and asked if she could really have the kitten. The guy said of course, though in his own head, this dude was thinking it was so exciting. But out loud, he just told her to keep it a secret from her mom, like, don't tell anyone where you got the kitten. Bora, still way too trusting, promised she would. So, she started following the man deeper into the alley. The guy kept talking, telling her that kittens were really weak and needed to be warmed up quickly or they might get sick. Bora, thinking she was some sort of pro, said they'd better hurry then. She started giving advice about soaking kibble in water for little cats and saying there were snacks you could give. The man played along, telling her she sounded like a real cat expert. And, bro, with every step, things were getting shadier and shadier. But let's leave that dark alley for a sec and skip to the hospital. Inside Professor Kim's office, our boy Sin-hyuk was sitting across from the professor. There was this little coffee table between them, stacked with every kind of canned drink and bottled juice in the city, like the guy was ready for a party just for Sin-hyuk. Professor Kim looked a little nervous and said he didn't know what Sin-hyuk would like, so he brought everything. Then he asked how he was feeling. Sin-hyuk kept it short. He just said he was good. The professor was glad to hear it and asked if he had any plans now that he was being discharged. Then he got to the big talk. He wanted to ask Sin-hyuk something important. He said he had extra rooms at his house, and if he was okay with it, maybe he could come live with him. If Sin-hyuk agreed to become his son, the professor promised to help with school, a future job, whatever dreams he might have. Our MC started thinking. He knew it was a great offer, way better than going to some orphanage where life would be rough. He realized the smart move would be to accept, but the moment was ruined by a sudden, bloody image of his dead father flashing in his mind. The vision was super freaky. His dad's voice came back, asking if Sin-hyuk really thought he could live peacefully after causing him to end up like that. Our protagonist tried to tell himself it was just a hallucination, some messed up brain thing from the coma. But then he wondered, what if it wasn't just some crazy vision? What if there was something real he couldn't remember? Professor Kim stopped the silence and asked again, so, would Sin-hyuk like to? But Sin-hyuk cut in and said he had a request. The professor was surprised but told him to go ahead. Sin-hyuk asked if Professor Kim would be willing to become his legal guardian instead. The professor was confused for a second. Legal guardian? Sin-hyuk explained that he really appreciated the offer and knew he'd be happier if he became the professor's adopted son, but there was something he absolutely had to do at home first. There were unresolved things. He needed to dig into his parents' deaths, because he didn't think they were just accidents. Professor Kim was shocked and asked what he meant, but even if that was true, he didn't think he could just let a kid live alone. Sin-hyuk said he hoped they could still stay close, but if he moved in now, he'd just end up being a burden since his mind wouldn't be at peace. His father Illusion smiled, saying at least his son knew he wasn't someone who deserved happiness and always brought pain to others. So, our boy just bowed, hoping the doctor would decide to accept his condition. Inside, he was stressing out. If he became the professor's adopted son, he'd have to go to school and be stuck with all sorts of rules. But if he said no completely, he'd be a minor with zero legal rights, basically destined for an orphanage. So, having a legal guardian would be the only way to get both independence and support. Smart move, honestly. The professor had to think about it. He was wondering to himself if any other kid acted like this. Wasn't Sin-hyuk scared to live alone? And how was he supposed to answer a kid who sounded more like an adult? Finally, he made up his mind. He told Sin Hyuk that, no matter what, he really didn't want to let him live alone. But since he seemed different from other kids, he wanted to give it a try. So, yeah, he agreed. He'd be his legal guardian. Sin Hyuk started to thank him, but the professor held up a finger and said there was a condition. He put an old flip phone on the table and told him to take it. Our boy picked it up, a little confused. The professor said he'd have to check in every day, let him know how he was doing. That was the deal. Then, he told him to check the back. There was a bank card taped there. The professor promised to deposit 300,000 won every month. If Sin Hyuk needed more, he just had to call. RMC was shocked. Bro, it was basically a sponsored speedrun into independent living. The professor told him not to feel alone, to rely on him, and said that if he felt weird about accepting money, they could just call it a debt. He could pay it all back someday, with interest. The professor even joked about it, trying to keep things light. Sin Hyuk looked serious, saying he'd pay it all back, he promised. The professor stuck out his hand for a handshake. Sin Hyuk hesitated just a second, then shook it. For a split second, he remembered shaking hands with the professor back in that weird library in his head. It feels so warm. Now, the sun was basically setting, and Sin Hyuk got off the bus in his old neighborhood. He was rocking a hoodie, had his backpack, and was carrying a big paper bag full of snacks. He was even remembering the nurses at the hospital, how they'd cheered for him, telling him not to come back and to eat well. They'd acted like he'd just graduated from something epic. Standing at the bus stop, he sighed, thinking to himself that he could really use a strong espresso right now. Dude sounded so mature for a kid. Suddenly, he could hear a woman yelling someone's name. That woman was Bora's mom. Her mom spotted our boy and rushed over, grabbed his shoulders, and demanded to know if he'd seen Bora, her daughter, Bora. Sin Hyuk's brain just stuttered. As the realization hit, his eyes went wide and his whole face dropped in horror. It's like his brain just glitched. But then he remembered who Bora was. He started thinking about her and her family, all those memories hitting him at once. Now, his mind flashed back to when he was younger. That time, he'd sat at Bora's dinner table, all bruised up and skinny. Bora's mom had given him a bowl of rice, saying he must be starving, then cursed his dad for being trash who hit his own kid and didn't even feed him. Little Bora had reached over and put some egg on his rice, telling him to eat it too. Sin Hyuk said thank you, and man, Bora just smiled like she was proud to help. Back to the present, Sin Hyuk looked at Bora's mom, who was basically falling apart right there on the sidewalk. Suddenly, he snapped out of it and asked her if Bora was missing and wanted to know when she left and why. Bora's mom said it was around 4:30 p.m., and Bora had just gone out for a bit to feed Cream, the stray cat she loved. Sin Hyuk double-checked. Cream? The cat? The mom explained that Bora always fed Cream just outside their house, so she usually came back right away. But this time, she'd stepped out to the convenience store, and when she came back, Bora was gone. She asked if maybe Sin Hyuk had seen her, but our boy was already getting suspicious. He thought to himself that Bora always had her phone on her these days, taking pictures of Cream and sending them to her friends. But apparently, her phone was off now. That did not make sense. Something was way off. Bora's mom said again that she hadn't seen Bora and was about to go look for her. Our boy grabbed her sleeve and told her seriously that she should report it. The mom hesitated. Was it really that bad? He said, bro, if this was a kidnapping, they had no time. He explained that, in those cases, there was a 75% chance of murder within 3 hours. Yeah, that shut her up fast. The mom freaked out at the word murder, but Sin Hyuk said they had to move fast and report first, then search together. She was shaking as she called the police. The operator picked up, and the mom was so freaked out she could barely talk. She said Bora was 9, and her name was Jong Bora. The cop on the other end, honestly, what a pain, kept telling her to calm down, asking if Bora maybe went to hang with her friends, or if she'd tried calling around. The mom insisted this had never happened before and her phone was off. The cop just told her to wait. Apparently, they thought little kids just got distracted sometimes. Sin Hyuk was listening to all this, getting more and more pissed off at how slow they were acting. The mom finally asked if she was just supposed to wait and do nothing while her 9-year-old was missing. That hit hard. Sin Hyuk checked his flip phone, 1752, dude, and called Professor Kim. The professor answered, all relaxed, thinking Sin Hyuk was just checking in. But Sin Hyuk cut him off quick, saying he thought his friend was kidnapped and that the cops weren't helping. He asked if Professor Kim could use his connections to help. Professor Kim was shocked, but Sin Hyuk explained more in his head. He figured a hospital professor in his 50s probably knew some people in law or government. The professor asked for the address, and after Sin Hyuk gave it, he hung up, already planning what to do next. Our boy was racing through all the possibilities in his head. Maybe Bora met a friend or her phone died, but that made no sense. She always fed the cat at the same time and always had her phone. Plus, there were barely any CCTVs around, so there were tons of blind spots for crime. It was looking more and more serious. He told Bora's mom he was going to check around her house. He sprinted up a long flight of stairs while the mom shouted after him. Inside, he was praying. Just let Bora be okay. He had a quick memory of Bora from the neighborhood, back when he was even younger. She asked him why he didn't come to school, and if he wanted to come to her place, offering to eat together. He'd tried to push her away back then, but she just wanted to help. Shaking off the memory, our boy kept running. He was desperate now. Nearby, inside a rundown house, the window was covered in black plastic, and cat food was scattered on the ground. A phone lay there, screen shattered. In the doorway, we could see the pale, bare feet of a small kid. And there he was, the creepy man, breathing heavy, a huge, messed-up grin on his face. Yeah, bro, things were looking bad. Our MC was in a race against time, and it did not look good for Bora. Meanwhile, our MC was standing outside Bora's house, sucking in the freezing air like he was trying not to pass out. He looked around that tiny, snowy alley, taking in every little detail. This dude was not just panicking, he was analyzing, like a mini detective. He thought to himself that this road was too tiny for someone to kidnap a kid by car. So whoever did it probably lived nearby and just walked. Then he spotted the cat food bowls, totally untouched. That made him pause. He decided it was way more likely that Bora followed someone she knew, not that she was dragged off by force. He figured, whoever did this, it had to be a guy from the neighborhood. Basically, someone Bora already knew, and a total creep. In his mind, he pictured Bora walking away with some random dude. He guessed it was probably a man who lived alone, maybe doing day jobs, not really talking to anyone, and for sure not someone any adult woman would want to hang out with. Damn, our MC was getting way too good at this profiling thing. And then, boom. Bad memory hit him out of nowhere. He was a little kid again, at home in the dark, and his drunk dad was throwing soju bottles at his head. That bottle smashed right onto him. His dad started yelling that Sin Hyuk was useless and told him to get out and find the jerk who killed his mother. Little Sin Hyuk, all bruised and bleeding, promised he'd go out searching again. He ran into the snowy street while his dad sat there, drinking and cursing, throwing more bottles and acting like a trash human. Back in the present, Sin Hyuk was touching his head, remembering all of that. He realized that, because of his dad's violence, he knew way too much about who lived around here, what they did, and who they hung out with. He tried to remember, okay, which man fit all those creepy details? He thought of two possible people, but one guy lived closest to Bora's house, Oh Jun-tae. Our MC broke into a run, thinking about this Oh Jun-tae guy, 35 years old, lives alone, does manual labor, drinks a lot, and sometimes drank with Sin Hyuk's dad. He remembered seeing them together at some beat-up outdoor table, both looking like they had nothing better to do. He made it to Oh Jun-tae's place, a brick house with a metal gate, but that place was locked. Inside the house, the creepy man was turning with that nasty grin and walking toward Bora. Then, Sin Hyuk started pounding on the gate, trying to rile up the guy inside. He thought that the creep might be enjoying the whole situation, trying to mess with the prey. Sin Hyuk called him again and again, trying to sound innocent so Jun-tae would drop his guard and open the door. Jun-tae shouted back, annoyed, asking who the hell it was. Sin Hyuk said it was him. Sin Hyuk then told him he had something important to say and that he really needed to come out. He even threatened, saying Jun-tae would be in big trouble if he didn't open up. He figured, if Jun-tae just cracked the door and closed it quick, it meant he was hiding something inside for sure. The gate burst open, and there was the ugly Jun-tae, looking pissed as hell. He told Sin Hyuk he could get himself killed acting like that, and asked why he was running around being so bold. Our MC, though, was all business. He still wasn't totally sure, so he decided to test Jun-tae with a question and watch how he reacted. He asked if Bora was still at his place, since they were supposed to be playing together. That question hit hard. Jun-tae totally froze and started stuttering, saying Bora wasn't there, and what was Sin Hyuk even talking about? He told him to leave before he got in trouble. But Sin Hyuk pushed harder, saying he saw them going in and then went home. Jun-tae's face changed. He looked both pissed and scared now. He asked Sin Hyuk if he really saw something, grabbing him by the collar like he might snap. Sin Hyuk just played dumb, but in his head, he was fully sure, 100% this was the guy. Right then, a police siren echoed down the street. Jun-tae freaked, let go of Sin Hyuk and tried to act all friendly suddenly. He patted Sin Hyuk's shoulder, put on a fake smile, and said Bora told him not to tell anyone that she was at his house, that she was just playing with a kitten. But our boy caught him. His eyes shifted right, which meant he was totally making stuff up. Sin Hyuk tested him, asking about the kitten, and Juntae said, "Yeah, there was a cute cat. Did Sin Hyuk want to come see it?" Sin Hyuk acted interested, and Juntae quickly welcomed him, putting an arm around his shoulder and leading him toward the house. He unlocked the door and told Sin Hyuk to go on in, saying Bora would be happy to see him. Man, that was sketchy as hell. Also, look at this disgusting face. I want to punch him so bad, for God's sake. Anyway, inside a police car nearby, there were two cops who looked just tired of everything. One officer wondered what the hell was up with the boss, because the boss always said patrolling here was just a waste of time. The other officer told him maybe someone from higher up was on his back. Don't think too much, they just do what they're told. Then told the other one to pull over, and the car stopped. Now, the officer said they'd just take a look around and then go back for some coffee. That's when the bad guy saw the police earlier. So, Juntae led our hero to his front door. But Sin Hyuk was thinking fast, telling himself that he needed to play along for now. He needed to check on Bora and see if she was alright. When they got to the door, Juntae started laughing to himself as he opened it. Sin Hyuk noticed right away that all the windows were covered with black plastic. He figured that meant there was something inside that couldn't be seen from the outside. No way, Bora was definitely in there. Juntae asked what Sin Hyuk was waiting for and told him to go in. But our MC stopped and hit him with a weird fact, saying all the nerves meet at the temple, and if you get hit hard there, you can faint right away. Bro, our boy was planning something for real. He started walking up the stairs, telling the man he couldn't reach his temple as a kid, but now he was at the same height thanks to the stairs. Juntae was confused, but before he knew it, Sin Hyuk swung his old flip phone as hard as he could and nailed the guy right in the temple. The creep stumbled back, but Sin Hyuk realized one hit wasn't enough with his kid-sized body. So he jumped and then just went wild, hitting the temple again and again until the man was out cold. Honestly, our hero was not messing around. Once the bad guy was out, Sin Hyuk ran to the door, unlocked it, and started yelling for the police. He pounded on the wall and called out for help, telling the officers there was someone collapsed outside. The cops outside heard all the noise and started to check it out. Sin Hyuk, meanwhile, was praying Bora was safe as he ran inside the house, eyes wide at what he saw. The suspense? Man, it was intense. Back outside, the officers were trying to figure out what was going on. They saw Juntae's body sprawled on the ground. The officer knelt down and tried to wake him up, joking that sleeping outside was dangerous. But when the guy didn't answer, he said they'd better call an ambulance. The other officer told him to stop messing around and to go inside and check. The one officer walked up to the open door and peeked in, and bro, he was shocked at what he saw. Inside the house, Sin Hyuk was kneeling on the ground, holding Bora, who was crying her eyes out. Sin Hyuk asked if he came because of the report. He just looked up and told the officer that the girl was Bora Jong, the kidnapped kid. He explained that the man outside was the kidnapper, Oh Juntae, and that he had tied Bora up with tape and kept her there. Sin Hyuk told the officer all the evidence was right there. Fingerprints, DNA, everything, so they needed to call in the forensics team. He said Bora needed rest, and he'd contact her mom himself, but the officer should call emergency services right now. The officer was still a bit lost, but Sin Hyuk yelled at him to hurry up. Dude was not playing around. A bit later, outside, the other officer was still kneeling next to Juntae, who suddenly woke up, scaring him half to death. The officers tried to talk to the guy, but Sin Hyuk came storming out and just straight up kicked him in the face again. The cop literally freaked out, saying, "You can't just go around hitting people like that." But Sin Hyuk said this man wasn't even human. He was a kidnapper worse than any animal. He told the officer to arrest Juntae right then and there as a criminal caught in the act. With sirens wailing and more cops and an ambulance showing up, the scene got crazy. Bora's mom arrived and hugged her daughter so tight, crying with relief. Then we cut to the police station. Oh, Juntae was now sitting in handcuffs across from a detective, still trying to act innocent. He tried to say it was a misunderstanding and that he just let the kids see a cat. The detective was not having it. He slammed his hand on the table and told him his fingerprints were all over the tape used to tie Bora and her phone, so there was no way out. He said they had witness statements and told him to just confess before things got worse. Juntae realized Sin Hyuk must have been the witness and started whining that brat hit him. The detective got mad and grabbed him by the collar, telling him only trash like him would target kids, and if he didn't come clean, he'd treat him like a bug from now on. Meanwhile, two detectives watched from outside the room, saying their senior was acting super intense lately. First the stabbing case, now volunteering. One of them said it was weird how someone could just change like that overnight, but at least it made their boss look good. Finally, in the hospital, Bora was lying in bed with her mom beside her. Our boy Sin Hyuk was sitting in a chair close by. Bora's mom thanked him, saying if it wasn't for him, things could have been way worse. Sin Hyuk said it was nothing and told her that Bora was really brave, and from now on, she should just focus on good things and forget this bad dream. Bora's mom thanked him, saying he had really grown up since she last saw him. She said if Sin Hyuk's mother were still alive, she'd be so proud. Then, out of nowhere, she asked about someone named Haejin, saying she hadn't seen her since Sin Hyuk's mom's accident. At that, our hero's face went white with shock. He suddenly collapsed out of his chair, and Bora's mom freaked out, calling his name. Sin Hyuk's vision blurred, and he saw a memory of a girl with reddish hair and a ponytail. In his head, he called out for Haejin, and then heard her voice say, "Oppa!" Our boy was definitely in trouble now. Something from his past was coming back hard. Anyway, suddenly our MC stood at his house, just staring at it, thinking to himself if it had really been a month since he came back home. Man, time was moving weird for him. But here's where it gets creepy. Far away, some dude in a dark beanie was watching him. This guy didn't say a word out loud. He just pulled out an old phone and sent a weird message about confirmed arrival of Sundrone to hatchery. And then he got a reply from someone called Overlord, telling him to keep watching until something arrived at a vulture drop site. Bro, what kind of code names are these people using? Anyway, the creepy guy kept watching as our MC went inside. Now Sin Hyuk stepped through the door and the place was just disgusting. Trash and empty soju bottles everywhere. He didn't say a word, just walked through that mess like he was used to it. Then, his mind started throwing him back to the hospital, thinking about Bora's mom. She had asked him how Haejin was doing. That hit our protagonist hard. Suddenly he remembered he had a little sister, or at least, he used to. But for some reason, he had totally forgotten her until now. He tried to tell himself that it was normal. Maybe it was just memory loss because of the coma. But bro, every time he tried to think about his sister, it wasn't love he felt. It was straight up fear, like there was something so wrong that he should never remember. Like she was some kind of Pandora's box locked in his mind. His head started hurting bad. And that's when he found it. He walked into a room and saw this old, worn-out science encyclopedia sitting on a dusty table. He said this was it, the first book his mom ever bought for him. While he flipped through the pages, a folded note fell out. That got his attention quick. When he opened it, he realized it was in his mom's handwriting. The note said she had to rush out with Haejin and would be back soon, so he should wait. But then, he noticed something even more strange. On the back of the note, there was some writing that looked like it had been erased. When he held it up to the light, he could see the words, "Run away from Dad." Bro, that's when things got dark. He just stood there and suddenly heard a voice. It was all echoey, asking why he killed him. Our boy turned around and, holy crap, there was a bloody, messed up ghost version of his dad right behind him. The ghost kept shouting, asking why Sin Hyuk killed him, calling him a killer over and over. Sin Hyuk freaked out, stuttering and asking what the hell was going on. That's when we flashed back to the bad old days. Little Sin Hyuk was all bruised up, hiding in the storage, eating dry ramen like a scared animal. His drunk dad barged in, yelling at him for eating like a rat. The guy wanted to know if some dude named Choi Sung-moon was home yet, and when Sin Hyuk said no, the old man lost it, calling him useless and beating him up. Then, just like that, he told him to get up, because they had somewhere to go. Even though Sin Hyuk told his dad not to drive drunk, the man dragged him outside and shoved him into the passenger seat of his truck anyway. What a mess. Inside the truck, little Sin Hyuk sat there, shaking and scared. He buckled his seatbelt, looked at his dad's, and secretly did something to his dad's seatbelt. Suddenly, his dad came inside the car and plugged his seatbelt. Damn, bro, there is a plastic noodle there, making the seatbelt slippery. But the dad didn't notice it, and he started yelling again. He told Sin Hyuk to go to the police and say Choi Sung-moon killed his mom. Just like that. But then, something outside caught their attention, a figure in the road. Sin Hyuk tried to warn his dad, but the guy panicked, yanked the steering wheel, and the truck spun out, crashed through a guardrail, and tumbled down hard, smashing into a pole. But because that plastic bag, his father's seatbelt unlocked, Sin Hyuk looked over and saw his dad, dead. Suddenly, his dad's ghostly voice rang out, asking if he remembered now that he killed him. It hit our MC. Did he really kill his own dad? The ghost told him that was right, calling him a murderous bastard. Back in the present, Sin Hyuk snapped. He screamed no at the top of his lungs. Outside, the man in the beanie heard the scream and was like, "What the hell was that?" He kept watching as Sin Hyuk came bursting out of the house, running like crazy down the snowy street. Now our poor guy was running, completely losing it, thinking to himself that he was a murderer. He bumped into some random person, who apologized, but Sin Hyuk told him it was fine and not to worry about it. But, bro, when he looked at a shop window, he saw his own reflection. That creepy black wolf monster with yellow eyes was staring back again. Sin Hyuk freaked out, stumbled back, but when he looked again, the thing was gone. But he could see someone keep watching at him. So he just kept running, not even caring where he was going. The beanie guy trailed behind, typing on his phone that the drone had left the hatchery and he was in pursuit. He was getting annoyed, wondering where Sin Hyuk was running off to now. He followed him into a dead-end alley. All he found was Sin Hyuk's hoodie, lying on the ground. The man bent down and wondered out loud if this was Sin Hyuk's shirt, and why the hell he left it there. But then, out of nowhere, our MC showed up behind him, holding a sharp piece of broken glass to his throat and told him to stay still. Yeah, that escalated real quick. Our boy was not playing around anymore. Realizing he was in danger, the beanie guy just froze, totally scared for his life. He tried to lower his hands, thinking maybe he could get out of this, but Sin Hyuk told him exactly how close he was to dying. The poor guy was shaking as he stopped his hands now, probably thinking this was the end. Sin Hyuk started the interrogation, asking why the man was following him. The dude tried to play innocent, saying he was just passing by. But our hero pressed the glass harder and went all science nerd on him, explaining how people's heartbeats change when they lie, and basically warning him he'd start bleeding everywhere if he didn't tell the truth. Bro, this kid was something else. Inside, the beanie man freaked out. He wondered if Sin Hyuk was even a real kid or some kind of monster, because nobody normal acts like this. He finally broke and admitted it was all orders from above. So, Sin Hyuk kept pushing, wanting to know who was really in charge, what the plan was. The guy spilled everything he knew. He said there was someone way up at the top, planning everything, and the plan was to lure Sin Hyuk somewhere and kill him in a fake car accident. All just for money, bro. Pretty sick, right? The beanie man said he didn't know all the details, but it was like squeezing every last bit of money from people, no matter how young or poor. Sin Hyuk asked if the man really knew him and his family, and the guy told him they'd been watching his whole family for a long time. That was when Sin Hyuk went for the big question. Were these people the ones who killed his mom? The man tried to say it was unfair to put it that way, but Sin Hyuk shot right back, asking about his dad. The man pretty much confirmed that Sin Hyuk's dad was the one who started it all. In his head, Sin Hyuk clicked it all together. His dad was mixed up in his mom's death, but someone else had been pulling the strings. He demanded to know about the mastermind, but the beanie man swore he only got orders by phone and never met the boss. And he could tell this guy wasn't lying. So, he told him to take out his phone, put it on the ground. The man hesitated, said the phone was in his pocket, and then, bam, tried to stab Sin Hyuk with a knife from out of nowhere. But our boy was faster. He sliced the man's neck with the glass, not too deep, but deep enough to make the guy panic as blood started pouring out. The man tried to brag, saying Sin Hyuk was dead now, but then realized he was the one bleeding out. He could barely talk, clutching at his neck. Sin Hyuk told him he only cut 1 centimeter. So, if the guy ran to the hospital right away, maybe he'd survive. Then, like a total boss, he picked up the man's phone and walked away, leaving him bleeding in the snow. The dude just lay there, making dying noises. That was wild. Now our MC hid near a PC cafe, keeping watch to make sure nobody else was following him. He checked out the flip phone he stole, thinking how easy it would be to hack it with a computer. He figured out this was a real cell system, meaning even the people doing the dirty work didn't know each other, just like in spy movies, and the real mastermind was at the center, giving orders. Inside the PC cafe, Sin Hyuk got right to work, plugging the phone into the computer and smashing through the password. No call logs, just weird coded text messages. As he read, he decoded all the words. Drone meant his family, hatchery was his house, mineral meant money, vulture was the car for the accident, and drop location was the crash site. The worst part? The way these people talked about destroying families like it was just some game, that made our boy super mad. And now he realized, if they targeted him, they were probably after Haejin too, his little sister. He knew he had to check if Haejin was safe, but his plan was kind of risky, only about a 50-50 chance. But he had to try. He started typing a message on the stolen phone, pretending to be the beanie guy. He sent a question to the guy at the top, asking if they had found daughter drone yet. On the other side, the big boss, some dude called Overlord, got the message and was confused, since the beanie man didn't answer for a couple of hours before. Overlord texted back, saying he hadn't found the daughter because her mom kept hiding her. When Sin Hyuk read that reply, he felt so relieved he could breathe again. At least Haejin was safe for now. Our boy got realized. At least his sister is safe, for now. Then Sin Hyuk sent another text, asking about Sun Drone, and even asked if Overlord was the mastermind. Overlord got annoyed. What the hell does this fucking guy mean? Suddenly, a young dude who was playing video games turned around, asking what happened. The director looked at him, called his name Aki, and explained that he had received some strange messages from one of his underlings. Aki gets all curious and asks to see the phone, so the director hands it to him. He then starts checking the messages and, after a moment, he drops a bomb. He tells the director that he's been tricked. The person texting wasn't really his underling. Dude, the director freaks out. He can't believe it. He's like, then who sent those weird texts? Aki explains it had to be the Sun drone. The director's jaw nearly hit the floor. He says the Sun drone is just a 9-year-old kid. Aki keeps his cool and shows him the proof. All the old messages never talked about a daughter drone, but suddenly this new message does. Which means whoever sent it was desperate to know about her, like only family would be. And the only family left is the older Sun drone. Yeah, that's our boy Sin Hyuk. Aki starts grinning, looking like he just won at life, and tells the director that Sun drone threw out bait and the director swallowed it whole. He says the director basically handed Sin Hyuk a present. The director tries to come up with excuses, guessing maybe that his underling just lost his phone and the kid picked it up. But Aki is like, nope, that's not it. He explains that the messages came in their secret language, so the kid must have threatened that man and grabbed the phone himself. The director just can't wrap his head around a 9-year-old pulling all this off. But Aki reminds him that he was only 9 when he did his own crazy stuff 3 years ago. The director suddenly looks like he's seen a ghost. Well, that makes sense. Right then, we get a flashback to a younger Aki. The Overlord guy is running for his life down a dark alley, totally beat up. He falls and finds himself blocked by little Aki, who looks calm as ice. The guy complains, wondering why this brat is causing so much chaos, and tells the kid to run home before he gets hurt. But Aki just drops a cold line. His mom and dad are dead. The man is stunned, but Aki suddenly says if the guy wants to live, he better listen. Because there are some people who have to die, the ones who killed his parents. If he could help him take revenge, he promised to make that man alive. Suddenly, a whole gang shows up with pipes, chasing the man. Aki gives the dude a creepy smile and tells him to choose, die or live. Then we snap back to the Overlord office. The Overlord is just staring at Aki, lost in thought, while Aki says since they got a text, maybe they should send one back. So, he starts typing on the phone. Meanwhile, our MC, Sin Hyuk, is camped out at a PC cafe. His phone buzzes with a new message. The message says, "Nice to meet you, Sun Drone." Sin Hyuk instantly knows it's the Overlord, the boss behind all the crazy stuff. Another message pops up, basically taunting him, saying they still haven't found Haejin, that's his little sister. But they're always casting bait, so it's just a matter of time before they catch her. Bro, that was cold. Our hero gets what they're doing. They want him to panic, to feel like they can get his sister anytime they want. He realizes he needs to find Haejin before they do. He wonders if maybe his mom left a clue behind, but going back to his house is way too risky. He figures out that even if he finds Haejin, as long as these bad guys are around, she'll never be safe. So, he decides, maybe the best way to protect her is to destroy the whole organization instead. Sin Hyuk types up a reply and sends it. Then, back in the Overlord's office, the phone buzzes. The message says Sin Hyuk took care of one of their guys, so now there's an open spot. He asks if he can join their crew. Aki just laughs, showing the message to the Overlord, and jokes that maybe Sin Hyuk hit his head too hard during that car accident. The Overlord suddenly remembers Sin Hyuk was in a coma and tells Aki all about it, saying they thought he'd be easy money once he woke up, but now things seem really weird. Aki just shrugs, saying he wanted to know if people could really change that much after something big, like being reborn, just like he once was. Now, Sin Hyuk's phone buzzes again. The reply says, "Good, let's meet. But our group isn't easy to join. You have to pass an interview. Meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in front of the fountain at Mirai Department Store." Sin Hyuk sits there thinking, realizing the boss picked a busy spot on purpose because he's careful and wants to avoid any trouble. He knows he needs to use the situation to shake things up and get an advantage. So he makes a call, planning to set something up. Back at the office, Aki and the Overlord are talking about the meeting spot. The Overlord wonders why not just pick a quiet place and finish things fast, but Aki says he only plays games he can win. There's a big chance that the police and the special investigators involved, so they need to off their backs. They talk about checking with their informant inside the police to see if there's any investigation going on about insurance fraud. The Overlord gets on the phone right away. To be honest, Aki was super pumped for the meeting, looking like he's ready for something wild to happen. Somehow, Detective Kang Se-jun, the detective in the start of the story, picks up his phone at the police station. Well, looks like things are about to get even messier. Anyway, before the call, Detective Kang Se-jun walking down a busy city street with his team of rookie cops trailing after him. He started whining about money, joking that this junior was basically trying to steal all his cash in the next round of drinks. He even moaned that cops didn't get paid enough for this, even when he just got promoted. but the others started teasing him, saying they would show mercy on Sejun poor wallet, like they were doing him a favor by not eating the whole bar. These guys really knew how to mess with their boss. Kang just grumbled and called them punks, but the juniors kept poking at him, pretending he was actually mad. One of them even joked about another's pea-sized brain, saying Kang's generosity was way bigger than that. The whole crew started cracking up, and Kang just looked even more done with their nonsense. Damn. Sometimes your real enemy isn't out there, it's your own team driving you insane. But right then, the boys snapped to attention and gave him a salute, calling out that they'd be loyal and begging him to take care of them. Classic move. Sejun just rolled his eyes and kicked them toward the entrance of a bar, telling them to get inside already. Yeah, the night was just getting started for these guys. But then, as the juniors rushed in, Detective Wu hung back. He called out for Sejun to hurry, and he turned to him, suddenly looking a bit more serious. Sejun quietly thanked Wu for always covering for him, saying he never could have made it this far without his help, even when he pushed too hard. Wu brushed it off and told him not to get all serious, saying he was the only one who really chased justice instead of just worrying about their numbers, so he was proud of him. Sejun just laughed, then playfully put him in a headlock and asked what he wanted. Wu groaned that he wouldn't mind a bottle of 2 one-year-old whiskey as a reward. That's when Sejun's phone suddenly started to ring. He saw it was an unknown number, which made him pause for a second. Wu joked that it was probably Sejun's loan manager calling, but he told him to quit it, then stepped away to answer. As he picked up, he answered with his name, a little suspicious. On the other end, our boy Sin Hyuk was calling from a PC cafe. Oh, thank God. I thought this guy was also a bad guy. Anyway, our protagonist asked if the detective remembered the kid who gave him the cigarette butt at the hospital, the kid who had helped with the Jo Jung-hwan case. Sejun's mind flashed back to the hospital, instantly recognizing the voice. He demanded to know how Sin Hyuk got his number and what this was about, but Sin Hyuk asked him to just listen, and said he needed his help. He even admitted he was trying to sound pitiful on purpose to get his attention. He told him that last year, in July, his mother died in a car accident. The police called it an accident, but he said the truth was much darker. It was actually murder for insurance money, planned by his own father with the help of an insurance fraud gang. And now, that same gang had tried to kill him too, setting up a staged crash just like before. According to Sin Hyuk, these guys weren't going to let him walk away after he'd seen everything. The detective was just stunned, barely able to believe what he was hearing. Sin Hyuk went on, saying that tomorrow at 2 p.m. he was supposed to meet the boss of the fraud ring in front of the Mirai department store. He explained that he couldn't just back out or tell any adults. Because the gang was holding his little sister hostage, they'd kill her if he didn't show up. Our MC was really spice up thing, but honestly, who could blame him? Sometimes you gotta play dirty to survive. Now Sejun was freaking out for real. He repeated back the story, asking if Sin Hyuk wanted him to catch the fraud ringleader. He tried to explain that the police usually couldn't do anything until after a crime actually happened, but Sin Hyuk just told him that it was enough to hear the truth. He said the important thing was to do what was right. The detective knew he was stuck now. There was no way he could just ignore this. He asked for Sin Hyuk's name, and our hero told him. He then asked for details about the accident last year, wanting to know more. Back at the PC cafe, after the call, Sin Hyuk thought he was finally going to use this whole mess to hit the bad guys where it hurt. But suddenly, he saw that Professor Kim was calling him. Meanwhile, back at the bar, Detective Wu was waiting inside, probably wondering what was taking so long. Sejun finally came back in, acting casual, and asked Wu for the phone number of his contact in the insurance fraud team. Wu got suspicious, asking if that call had just been from the hospital kid. Sejun was surprised he knew, but Wu said he could hear everything from outside. He looked pretty worried, and straight up said, "Don't do it, bro." Hearing that, Sejun was just shocked. What happened with his junior? Suddenly, Wu laughed it off, pretending he was a little drunk and said he'd text Sejun the number later. But Sejun handed him his credit card, warning him not to go too crazy, and said he'd be heading to the station for a bit. Wu was left there, looking super conflicted, while Sejun took off. Dude, this guy is super suspicious. Look at those crazy fucking eyes. As soon as Sejun was gone, Wu made a big decision. He took out his own phone and called the Internal Affairs Division to report a fellow officer for taking illegal kickbacks. Damn, talk about a plot twist.